Hare Krishna, welcome to this special program on the systematic study of the topmost revealed scripture of this world, the Srimad Bhagavatam. Before we begin today's session, I shall chant a few prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudidayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Hare Krishna, I would like to welcome all the viewers again for this special program on the systematic study of the essence of all the Vedic scriptures, the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam contains a total of 12 cantos, 335 chapters and 18,000 shlokas. We are now currently in the analysis and study of the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam that contains 19 chapters and 851 shlokas or verses. We have heard the very fascinating story of a great demon by name Vritrasura, who was also a great Mahabhagavata, a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna. The 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam very wonderfully explains the great battle that took place between Vritrasura and the combined forces of all the devatas, of all the demigods of the heavenly planets. Vritrasura was almost single-handedly able to defeat all the devatas, and later by the arrangement of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, Vritrasura was killed by Indra, but actually the real victory belonged to Vritrasura and not to Indra, because Vritrasura, in spite of external material loss, he attained the supreme victory of going back to the spiritual world, to the kingdom of God. Whereas Indra, in spite of gaining a so-called material victory, attained the greatest loss of continuing his material existence, to continue to rot in the cycle of birth and death in this samsara sagara. So this is the perspective of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The same story of the battle of Vritrasura and Indra is also narrated in many other Puranas and histories, but the perspective is quite different, wherein Indra is glorified and Vritrasura is demonized. Whereas in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find that Vritrasura is glorified. He is the real hero of this pastime, whereas Indra is considered to be a materialistic devotee attached to material gain, and he did all this simply for the sake of regaining his position in the material world, in the heavenly kingdom. So now, after Vritrasura attained the supreme perfection of returning back to the spiritual world, hearing this very amazing story, the history of Vritrasura, Parikshit Maharaj was greatly enthused, and out of great eagerness he asked, a very, very important question. This is narrated from the 14th chapter of the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We now have the story of the previous life of Vritrasura. So this is explained till the 17th chapter. In 4 chapters we find the story of the previous life of Vritrasura. So here Parikshit Maharaj was very astonished to hear the pure devotional qualities of Vritrasura, and he inquired from Shukadeva Goswami. He makes this very, very important statement in 6.14.5 that Muktanam api siddhanam narayana parayanaha sudurlabha prashantatma kotishvapi mahamune. That muktanam api siddhanam, Parikshit Maharaj says that even among muktatmas or liberated beings and siddhanam, among the perfected beings, Narayana Paraha, those who are completely surrendered to the Supreme Lord Narayana, to Lord Vishnu in pure devotional consciousness, Kotishvapi Mahamune, even among crores, among millions of liberated and perfected beings, Sudurlabhaha, it is very rare to find a completely surrendered pure devotee of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna. So Parikshit Maharaj inquired, how is it that Vritrasura, although seemingly born as a demon, yet was such an exalted pure devotee of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna? So now, in reply to this question about the reason, about the background, how Vritrasura attained such an exalted status in devotional service, in spiritual life, is revealed by Shukadeva Goswami in his reply by narrating the history of the previous life of Vritrasura. So Shukadeva Goswami explains that actually in his previous life, Vritrasura was a great king. He was the sovereign ruler of the entire world, the sovereign emperor of the earthly planet, and his name was Chitraketu. So now we have the wonderful history of Maharaj Chitraketu narrated in the text of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Chitraketu was a very great king and ruler, and Asid Raja Sarvabhaumaha Shura Seneshu Vainripa Chitraketuriti Khyato Yasyasid Kamadhunmahi. So in the province named as Shurasena was the king named Chitraketu, who ruled the entire earth. And Chitraketu also had Tasya Bharya Sahasranam Sahasrani Dashabhavan Santani Kaschapi Nripo Nalebheta Susantatim. Chitraketu had thousands and thousands of wives, yet he was unable to bear any children. He did not have any children. So in this way, by chance, by providence, all his wives were barren. So the eldest among the wives, the principal queen of King Chitraketu, her name is Kritadyuti. So as time passed, King Chitraketu, although had all the opulences of this material world, had always this pinprick in his heart that although he had a vast kingdom, many beautiful wives, immense wealth, and lot of possessions, he had everything that one could aspire for in the material realm. Yet he was highly dissatisfied because he lacked in one thing, that is he did not have any children. So this is actually the nature of this material world. This is also expressed very nicely by Arjuna in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita in the 8th verse. Arjuna expresses to Krishna that nahi prapashyami mamapanudyad yakshokamuchoshanam indriyanam avapya bhuma vasapatnam riddham rajyam suranam apichadipatyam. That even if I am able to gain sovereignty over the entire world and have all material possessions, even then I do not see any way to come out of my grief, out of my lamentation. So therefore we should learn here that although in the present day practically everyone is working very hard day and night to increase our material possessions more and more and more, so we should remember that even if we gain the entire earth and all the material possessions in this world, still we shall remain dissatisfied. That is the very characteristic and nature of this material world. Somewhere or the other there will be some pinprick, somewhere there will be some cause of unrest and dissatisfaction. So this was the case even with Maharaj Chitraketu. He had everything that one could ever think of, and yet he was highly dissatisfied. So as time passed, this thought increased more and more and caused even more pain in Chitraketu's heart, and he could not find any peace. One day, Chitraketu was he was honored to have a very great sage as his guest. So there arrived in Chitraketu's palace a great sage by name Angira Maharshi. So when Angira Maharshi came, he could understand. He was very well received by Maharaj Chitraketu, who honored him, who worshipped him. And then Angira could understand the mental state of King Chitraketu, and he inquired from him about his well-being and also asked him that is there something that makes your face so pale, and is there something that is of great, you seem to be in great trouble, and your heart seems to be highly dissatisfied. So at that time, King Chitraketu revealed to Angira Maharshi that although he had everything in material terms, yet he was bereft of any children, and that was causing constant pain and suffering to his heart. So he very humbly begged to Angira Muni to bless him to fulfill his long cherished desire of having a child. So Angira Muni then thought the real purpose of a saintly person to visit the common mass of people is to enlighten them, to awaken them to the real path of spiritual knowledge and spiritual life. But here Angira Maharshi observed that King Chitraketu was not ready or prepared to receive spiritual instruction because of his deep absorption in material thoughts. So Angira Maharshi then finally blessed him that all right, You shall bear a son in the womb of your eldest queen, Queen Kritadyuti, in a short period of time. But this child would be the cause of great happiness as well as great sorrow. So, when Angira Maharshi spoke in this manner, King Chitraketu was just eagerly anticipating to have a son, and he definitely understood that the son would be a cause of great jubilation and great happiness. And because Angira Muni had spoken cryptically that the child would also be a cause of great sorrow, King Chitraketu surmised that maybe because he would be the only child whom we have received after a very long period, a very long time, maybe he would be a little spoiled, and he would become something like a brat, a spoiled brat, and maybe that would cause some sorrow. But anyway, the great happiness of having a child in comparison to not having a child is, is so great that Chitraketu said, I would not mind that kind of a situation. So then Angira Muni left, and true to his words, after some time, Queen Kritadyuti became pregnant, and after some time, King Chitraketu and Queen Kritadyuti had a son. So this was the cause of very, very great happiness and jubilation, not only for Chitraketu and Queen Kritadyuti, but for the entire kingdom. Everyone rejoiced that finally our king has got a child, has got a son. So now Chitraketu finally obtained a son, and he began to spend his time in very, very great happiness. He would always be in the company of his newborn child and Queen Kritadyuti, and would very, very nicely enjoy the childhood activities of the child. And in this way, as time passed, King Chitraketu became so attached to this child and Queen Kritadyuti that he practically neglected all his other wives, who after some time became so morose, so sad, that they all thought that the cause of our condition, that we have been totally neglected by the king, our position is worse than even maid servants. So the cause of all this is the newborn child, and out of great envy and jealousy, the other queens became so hard-hearted, so cruel-hearted in their selfish perspective, that these other queens then finally decided and planned to kill the child by administering poison to the child. So these queens made this plan, and finally they poisoned this child. So when Chitraketu, when Queen Kritadyuti came to the child's chamber and asked the maid servant to bring the child, the maid servant observed that the child was motionless and was not breathing. The maid servant let out a great sigh, a great cry, and she just fell down, because she knew that the consequences would be very, very difficult to bear. Queen Kritadyuti also rushed to the cradle of the child and observed that the child had actually died. So she was unable to bear that. She also fainted. She became unconscious in great grief, and very quickly the news spread like wildfire. And when King Chitraketu heard that his most beloved, practically his heart and soul, his child had died, King Chitraketu was merged in an ocean of, he was drowned in an ocean of sorrow, and he rushed from his palace towards the chamber of the child. And as he was walking, he was unable to have even control over his movement. With every step he faltered, he fell down, got up with great difficulty, and somehow reached the queen's chamber, and fell down at the cradle of the child. And everyone, especially King Chitraketu and Queen Kritadyuti, began to loudly lament in intense grief as they observed that their most beloved child had died. So now, as the entire palace and the entire kingdom was drowned in an ocean of grief, a kind of, one can just imagine, one can think of the situation of King Chitraketu, that he had longed for a child for so long, finally obtained, and now, and had attained such great happiness and satisfaction, and finally he had to face this situation, which was the cause of great sorrow for King Chitraketu. And at that time again arrived to that place the great sage Angira, but this time he was also accompanied by the greatest spiritual master of this universe, Narada Muni. So Narada and Angira, both of them arrived at that scene, and then this was actually the right time to instruct spiritual knowledge to King Chitraketu. But because he was absorbed in great lamentation and grief, because he was very deeply aggrieved, he was still not in a position to hear any spiritual instruction. So Narada, by his mystic power, he gave the spiritual instructions. The most important spiritual knowledge was imparted by Narada and Angira to King Chitraketu through the medium of the dead child. So by his mystic power, Narada brought the dead child back to life. And the child, as it came back to life, King Chitraketu was again very, very joyful, and he addressed the child, "Oh my dear son." So the son of Chitraketu stopped him, stopped King Chitraketu. "Stop! Whom are you addressing as my son? Who are you?" So King Chitraketu explained that, "I am your dear father, this is your mother." And the child said, "Which father?" The child is now, this is a very interesting conversation between the dead child and King Chitraketu. So the child again asked that, "Which father, which mother? I, the Jivatma, have had thousands and millions and innumerable lifetimes. And in all these lives, I have had millions and innumerable fathers and mothers. In every life, I have got a pair of father, mother, brothers, sisters, family members, friends, and a certain kind of environment. And then there is death. And after that, another life and another set of parents, another father, mother, and society, friendship, and all this starts. like this I have had the Jiva. Jiva explains to King Chitraketu that I have had millions of fathers and mothers, and I have undergone this cycle of birth and death in so many lifetimes, and finally by the grace of the spiritual master have understood that my real identity is not this changing bodies which are like bubbles that arise in water, stay for some time and then are vanished. As soon as the bubble bursts, everything is finished with respect to the world of the bubble. And likewise, we take birth in this material world. Our life in this samsara, in this material world, is also comparable to a bubble that rises, stays for a few moments and then is burst. Likewise, here the time gap is of a few moments, and maybe we are like a bubble that stays for 50, 60 or about 100 years and then is finished, completely gone. So that is the truth about our existence in this material world, and one should understand this properly to come to the path of self-realization and understand that this body is nothing but a garment, is nothing but like a place of residence which we have been changing again and again and again in this material world, as very beautifully expressed in the Bhaja Govindam Stotra, that Punarapi Jananam, Punarapi Maranam, Punarapi Janani Chathare Shayanam, that again and again we take birth, again we die, and again we enter another mother's womb, again take birth, another body, a human body, an ant body, an insect body, or an animal body, or a reptile body, an amphibian body, or a Devata body. So any of these 84 lakh species of life, we have been wandering in this cycle of birth and death. So therefore the Jantu says that which father and mother are you? The father and mother give birth only to the body which has absolutely no connection to the real person, the real identity, that is the Jivatma, the soul. The soul is actually completely caught in this network, and the real purpose and objective of the human form of life is to attain liberation from this horrible and repeated cycle of birth and death, and attain the supreme perfection of attaining the eternal kingdom of the Supreme Lord, where there is no more rebirth and one becomes free from the cycle of birth and death. Being instructed by the Jivatma, by the living entity in the form of their son. Now King Chitraketu and Queen Kritadyuti and all those who were assembled at that place understood the real truth and the value of spiritual life, and in this manner they became free from all grief and lamentation. The child anyway, its time of material life had already come to an end, but he was especially invited by the great sage Narada and Angira to give this spiritual instruction to Chitraketu. So again the Jivatma went back, and then King Chitraketu surrendered completely to the great sage Narada and accepted him as his spiritual master, as his guru, and requested him to instruct him further to attain self-realization and God realization. So then Narada gave the very, very important instructions, the supreme teachings of Narada to Chitraketu, how one could attain complete self-realization and God realization, and Maharaj Chitraketu completely dedicated himself to this path as shown by Narada, and in just 7 days, King Chitraketu attained the ultimate perfection of self-realization and God realization. He specifically meditated on the form of the Lord as instructed by Narada, on the form of Sankarshana, and Sankarshana also resides beneath the Patala Loka, being served by many eternal associates. So King Chitraketu could actually have darshan of the Supreme Lord Sankarshana, and then Chitraketu offered many wonderful prayers to Lord Sankarshana, and then for some period of time before he could actually go back to the spiritual world, Lord Sankarshana appointed Chitraketu as the king of Vidyadhara Loka. So Chitraketu now was elevated to the post of being the king of the Vidyadhara Loka. So he became the best of the Vidyadharas, which is one among the celestial planets, the heavenly planets. And Chitraketu now spent all his time in complete meditation, in devotional consciousness of the Supreme Lord Krishna. So once when Chitraketu was traveling in his airplane, he saw a great assembly of saintly persons, and in that assembly was Lord Shiva and Bhavani, the wife of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva was seated in that great assembly of saintly persons. So it was kind of a satsanga, a spiritual meeting that was going on, and Lord Shiva had placed his consort Parvati Mata on his lap. So observing that, King Chitraketu made just a comment that how inappropriate is it for Lord Shiva, who is Yogishwara, the best among the yogis, that he has placed his wife on his lap. Although even Chitraketu was very well aware of the position of Lord Shiva and that he never gets degraded or falls down from his position in any situation, yet he thought of just commenting in this manner so that Lord Shiva becomes a good example to the world in the future, that in a spiritual assembly it is not so recommended to keep one's wife so close or embrace one's wife in a spiritual assembly. So this kind of a friendly talk was this was actually a friendly comment and nothing was meant in an offensive way. So this was also accepted as such by all the members in that assembly, as well as by Lord Shiva, who just smiled at this comment by Chitraketu. But one person who misunderstood the intentions of King Chitraketu was Bhavani or Parvati Mata. So Parvati Mata took it as an insult, and she became very offended and angry, and immediately Parvati Mata pronounced a curse that this person who is trying to find fault with the great Lord Shiva does not deserve to be in Vidyadhara Loka as the leader of the Vidyadharas, but he deserves actually being in such a degraded state. I now curse him to become a demon, to be born as a Rakshasa, as an Asura. So this was the severe curse pronounced by Parvati Devi upon King Chitraketu. So this was actually the reason for Maharaj Chitraketu, who was a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna, to take his next birth as Vritrasura. But now there is a very interesting, a very important episode in this narration. Normally, we find the script of all the Puranas, the reaction or the response of any person who has been cursed. In all the Puranas, the standard narration would be that if some person has been cursed either by some great sages or by the devatas, that person would become very fearful, and he would become very anxious that now I have received such a curse, and he would immediately approach that sage or that devata and beg pardon and somehow plead in many ways that please give me the solution or the remedy how to become free from that curse. This is the normal reaction of any ordinary or even an extraordinary person. But King Chitraketu, being a Mahabhagavata, a pure surrendered devotee of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna, is more than even extraordinary. A Mahabhagavata, his position actually surpasses even the great devatas. And this is now going to be a unique response shown by Maharaj Chitraketu. In spite of being cursed by Mother Parvati, King Chitraketu was completely undisturbed. He was completely unagitated. So we find the response, the reaction of King Chitraketu in the 17th chapter of the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. In 6.17.17, Maharaj Chitraketu very calmly, he got down from his airplane, came to Shiva and Parvati, to Lord Shiva and Parvati, offered his obeisances and said, Chitraketuruvacha Pratigrihnami te shapam atmano anjalinambike dever martyaya yat proktam purvadishtam hitasya tad. Ambike, my dear mother, with folded hands, I accept the curse that you have pronounced upon me. I do not mind the curse, for happiness and distress are preordained in this material world. And then in 6.17.18, King Chitraketu says that Samsara Chakra etasmin janturajnana mohitaha Brahmyan sukham cha dukkham cha bhungte sarvatra sarvada. Deluded by ignorance, the living entity wanders in the ocean of this material world, enjoying the happiness and distress. So he further says, this is a very beautiful, a very important statement. In 6.17.20, King Chitraketu says that Guna pravaha etasmin ko shapo konvanugraha kim kah swargo narako kova kim sukham dukkham evava. This material world is like an ocean, is like a samsara sagara, and therefore what is the meaning, what is the value of either a curse or a favor, of heaven or hell, or happiness and distress? So because the waves flow constantly in an ocean, none of them has an permanent or an eternal effect. So this is a very important spiritual instruction given by Maharaj Chitraketu. This material world is compared to a sagara. Sometimes the waves of an ocean may carry someone high up, but can one remain there? It is an ocean. Another wave would put the person who has gone high up again back to the lows, to the depths of the ocean. And again, will one remain there always? No, again he'll be by the force of the waves, he'll be taken, he'll be taught. In this way, a living entity in this material world is constantly tossed by the waves of Kala, by the waves of time. Sometimes a person, a living entity becomes a king or a devata. Sometimes the living entity becomes a human or an animal, or is sent to a hellish condition. So sometimes one is in a situation of great joy, and sometimes he is in great distress. But this is like constantly changing. So there is also, we should understand from here that none of these conditions are eternal or permanent in the material world. So in some religious systems, there is the concept of eternal condemnation or eternal damnation, that one day there is going to be a judgment day when all the dead people would rise up, and finally God would give his judgment, and some will be blessed to enter the eternal kingdom of God, and some will be eternally condemned to go to hell. So there is nothing like eternal condemnation by the most merciful and compassionate Supreme Lord Shri Krishna. There is eternal favor in the form of going back to the eternal kingdom of God. But hell or this material world, there is nothing eternal or permanent about it. There is always the chance and opportunity to return back to the eternal kingdom of the Supreme Lord. So having made such exalted spiritual statements to Parvati, and very humbly accepting whatever had happened without any kind of a retribution or even any kind of an anxiety to become free from his curse, Chitraketu Pratigrihnami, he said that I accept your curse, Anjalina, with folded hands, O Mother Parvati. And in this way, Chitraketu left that place. So now the entire spiritual assembly of Lord Shiva, Parvati, and all the great sages who were there were completely astonished by this unprecedented and unparalleled behavior of Maharaj Chitraketu. And then Lord Shiva himself spoke about the unparalleled glories of the pure devotees of Lord Sri Hari, of Lord Sri Krishna. In 6.17.27, Lord Shiva explains that Shri Rudra Uvacha Drishtavatyasi Sushroni Harer Adbhuta Karmanaha Mahatmyam Bhritya Bhrityanam Nisprihanam Mahatmanam. My dear beautiful Parvati, have you now seen the greatness of the Vaishnavas, the pure devotees of Lord Vishnu, being servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Hari? They are great souls, they are Mahatmas, they are not interested in any kind of material happiness. And then Lord Shiva in 6.17.28 gives a very wonderful description of the pure devotees of the Lord as Narayana para sarve na kutaschana bibhyati swargapavarga narakeshu api tulyarthadakshinaha. The pure devotees of the Supreme Lord, Narayana para sarve, engage solely in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they never are afraid, they never fear any condition of life. For them, the heavenly planets, the hellish planets, or even liberation are all the same, because either in hell or in heaven, or even after liberation. A pure devotee engages in the same activity in pure loving devotional service of the Supreme Lord. A very nice example is given that a say the basic nature of a pestle and mortar. A pestle, either it is in hell, it'll crush some things, either in the worldly, in the mortal world, or in the heavenly planets. So anywhere it goes, it performs the same activity. Or just like a typewriter or a laptop, whether it is in hell, it will do the same work of typing, or in the human world, or in the world of the devatas, its work is to type, and that's what a typewriter would do. Likewise, a pure devotee is completely surrendered to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Either in hell he would execute devotional service, either in the Bhuloka or in Svargaloka, or even after liberation, he is constantly and always engaged in the pure devotional service of the Supreme Lord Shri Krishna. Therefore, Lord Shiva says that such is the nature of the pure devotees of the Supreme Lord. They are undisturbed, they are not affected by any kind of material happiness or distress, or by curse or any favor. Dehinam deha samyogad dvandvanishvara leelaya sukham dukkham gatak janma shapo nugraha evacha. It is only because of the illusory energies, the living entities in this material world, in contact with material bodies, experience the various dualities of happiness, distress, birth, death, curse, favor. So, whereas the pure devotees of the Lord have surpassed all the material dualities, and therefore they are unaffected by any of these material dualities or material conditions. So even Lord Shiva, in fact, mildly reprimanded Mother Parvati that from next time onwards, be very, very careful in your dealings with the pure devotees of the Lord, the great Vaishnavas. This time maybe you have pronounced a curse, but next time be extremely careful not to commit such a mistake. So now King Chitraketu, being cursed by Mother Parvati, therefore in his next life he took birth as a demon by name Vritrasura, but devotional service, spiritual activity is never lost, is never impeded or obstructed by any condition. Even as a demon, Vritrasura was completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness, in devotional consciousness of the Supreme Lord. And in that way we have already heard how he attained the supreme destination of going back to the spiritual world, the eternal kingdom of God, Vaikuntha Loka. So this is the amazing and wonderful history of Vritrasura and of King Chitraketu. And after that, the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam also explains how Diti expressed her desire to harm or kill Indra, and begged from her husband Kashyapa to instruct her in a special vow or a process by which she could fulfill her desire. So then Kashyapa unwillingly, but he instructed her in the performance of a Payovrata ceremony, to subsist only on milk for 1 year and execute many vows, which are explained how one should execute the Payovrata ceremony. And Indra became very anxious, and he came, and then there is the description how by Indra's intervention, by his evil intentions, yet the child of the embryo of Diti was still protected from the evil intentions of Indra, and the birth of that child is divided, that one child got divided into 49, first into 7 and then each into further 7, and in this way the embryo of Diti was cut into 49 parts by Indra, and yet they did not die because of the potency of Lord Vishnu, because this Payovrata ceremony that was performed, that was executed by Diti, could protect the children in spite of being cut by Indra. So all these 49 children were then born, and they became later the associates of Indra, because they were already purified of all material contamination, because Diti had executed the Payovrata ceremony. So they were not born as demons, and they were born as, they were given the status, although they were the sons of Diti and therefore known as Daityas, but yet they were elevated to the post of Devatas. They became the 49 Marut Devatas, the 49 Devatas that control the movement of air. So this is the main content or subject matter of the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Thus concludes the 19th chapter of the 6th canto, and thus concludes the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. If you have any queries or questions, you are welcome to post it in the WhatsApp group or in the comments box in the YouTube channel. Please do like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and please do join us for the continuation of the systematic study of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.